Hey, so coming to you today from my son Jack's room for no significant reason other than this is where I could find some quiet space to talk because everybody's home. And we're home because, of course, of the pandemic. And the thing I've been thinking about today is when did it hit you that the pandemic is going to change everything? Like everything. I know for me, I'm talking about this like it's ancient history, but it was 2 months ago. It was March 12th is my last day at working at the church. And it was a Thursday. I go home, like that's my weekend, Friday and Saturday, and then I come back to work Sunday. And I thought we were going to have a youth group on Sunday. So everything changed like Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And by Sunday, we didn't have a youth group anymore. We didn't have worship at church anymore. And little did I know, like everything was going to change. And I don't know what this says about me. Read into it what you will. But it didn't really hit me that everything had changed until I started hearing people talking about the cancellation of the college football season. Like, again, I don't know what that says about me, but that's when it hit me that this is real. And that's really where I saw things start to cascade. And I started to realize, like, man, nothing is going to be the same. Now, the reason I bring this up is because we're in week 2 of this series, Subject to Change. And last week we talked about the fact that everybody knows this, that nothing stays the same. Everything changes. And if that's true, one of the things that's got to be true along with it is the fact that some of those changes are going to be disappointing to us. And the changes that are disappointing to us have something in common. They have to do with loss. And that can be all sorts of losses. I think right now we're upset about the loss of relationship. Like our friends are far away. We don't get to see them. Our family is far away. We don't get to see them. There's a loss of opportunity of the stuff that you wanted to do, maybe that job you wanted to get this summer, the extra classes you wanted to take, that spot on the team, the spot on the band, whatever it is. We can have loss of dreams and opportunities. There's also loss of stuff. Like we can lose stuff, like things that are important to us. That's there. There's also even probably worst of all is the loss of hope. The loss of the idea that things can get better. All these things have to do with the idea that something is gone and we're not getting it back. The other thing that these losses have in common is that a lot of times there's nothing that we can do about it. Like right now, there's, as much as I would want to change this, there's nothing that I can do about it. It's just something that's happened. It's something that we just have to deal with. It's a change that happens and no one asks us and we don't really get to choose what happens next. And that brings us to the question I think we have to talk about today. What do you do when there's nothing you can do? What do you do when there's a change that you hate, that brings loss to you, and there's nothing you can do about it? That's what we're taking a look at today. And one of the great things I think we can do is when you're faced with a situation where you don't know what to do, is you can take a look at the wisdom of the lives, of the writings of people who lived and wrote the Bible. And one of the people I want to take a look at today is a guy named Isaiah. And he's one of the prophets that we hear about, and his writings are in the Old Testament of the Bible, which means that he was kind of in the nation of Israel. And Israel as a nation, like as far as changes go, they've had some of the worst. In fact, Israel was subject to kind of a civil war, and then they split into a north and a south. And then other nations came in and conquered them and defeated them and then moved all their people out of their country and made them live someplace else. And that's where Isaiah was. He was right in the middle of all of that. And he was one of the people that had, because he was a prophet, he had to deliver the bad news. Like, changes are coming, Israel, and I'm the one who has to tell you. And this wasn't stuff he made up. This was stuff that God gave him to say because he was a prophet. So, the book of Isaiah, like the first half of it, is pretty bad news. There's a lot of bad news. But then you get to chapter 43. And let me read that to you. I had to figure out what I did with my Bible. Let me read to you what Isaiah wrote down, but this is God speaking to Israel through Isaiah. Here's what God says. The God who made you in the first place, Jacob, the one who got you started, Israel, that just lets us know that God's talking to the nation of Israel. Don't be afraid. I've redeemed you. I've called your name. You are mine. When you're in over your head, I'll be there with you. When you're in rough waters, you will not go down. When you're between a rock and a hard place, it won't be a dead end, because I am God, your personal God, the Holy of Israel, your Savior. So that's what God is saying to Israel. And there's a couple things I want you to notice there. The first thing is that this illustrates what we talked about last week. The fact that our situation changes, but God doesn't. God loved Israel when they were a nation. God loved Israel even when they're in the middle of rebelling against God and starting off all this huge series of unfortunate events. When they're occupied, God loved them. When they're in exile, God loved them. When they come back, God loved them. Again, the situation changed, but God didn't. But the other thing I want you to notice in here is that God doesn't say, let's see, if you're in over your head, I'll be with you. If you're in rough waters, you will not go down. God says when. When you're in overhead, I'll be there with you. When you're in rough waters, you will not go down. That tells me that God knows about the changes that are happening and that we're not going to like some of them. That God is aware. God isn't surprised by them, I guess is the best thing to say. And I think that brings us to our bottom line for this week. And that's this. And this is probably the simplest one we've ever had, so everybody can memorize this one. No matter what, God is with you. No matter what, God is with you. Not when, not if things go bad, when things go bad, God is with you. Now, because God doesn't change it, we shouldn't be surprised that Jesus, a couple centuries later, would say something pretty similar to what God was saying through Isaiah that we just read. Here's what Jesus said. He said, here on earth you will have many trials and sorrows. So when, not if, right? But Jesus continued, said, take heart, because I have overcome the world. I wish you could get a chance to say that out loud, because just saying it kind of gives you this sense of wow, like this sense of wonder that Jesus is bold enough to say to take heart because I have overcome the world. It encourages me just saying it. So, this brings me to an important point. Why does God go with us through fire and water? Why is Jesus with us when we have trials and sorrows? It's because God is bigger than fire and water. And Jesus is stronger than the trials and the sorrows we face. They don't scare God. They're not afraid. And we don't have to be either, because God goes with us. Jesus is with us in all those things. Now, that's all been stuff to know, and I think it's been important stuff to know. But for me, I like to have something to do as well as the know. So I want to go back to what Jesus said, just two words that he said that I think are so important. And he said, take heart. Now, that's not a phrase a lot of us use very often, so let me explain it. To take heart means to be courageous, to make a courageous choice. So, I think what Jesus is saying is that when you have choices that you're coming up against, is make the courageous choice. Now, what am I talking about? I think for us, there's a lot of examples. Right now, a lot of us have faced a lot of change that's really hard. And we come up against a choice. Are we going to numb the negative feelings, or are we going to deal with them? Numb or deal with them? Numbing them would be just distracting ourselves to the point where we never think that we're upset or sad. And that could be through Netflix all day. It could be through substances. Or we could deal with what we're going through. I mean, for me, at least, it meant naming my losses. Like, what was I upset about? Because the longer I went without acknowledging what I was upset about and just saying like, oh, this will be fine, I didn't really heal. And that's what I needed. And God wants healing for us. So when you're faced with the choice of numbing or dealing with something, make a courageous choice and deal with something. Now, doing that, I think it requires something really important. It often requires somebody else. And right now, we have another choice. A lot of us have access to social media, and that's keeping us connected, and that's great. But let's be real, social media tends to be a little bit shallow. And again, I'm not saying it's wrong, but if the only thing we're using social media for is just like to post pictures and get likes and hopefully somebody notices us, like that's fine, but that's relatively shallow compared to what we could be doing. Like there's power in community. There's a power in being real with other people about what you're going through and why it hurts, and hearing from them and sharing with them and saying, hey, it's me too. That's real community. And hopefully you're going to do that in your small groups tonight, and you've been doing it in your small groups, but that's a courageous choice to let people in and know that you're hurting. So I hope you make that choice because it's a courageous choice. And the third thing is, once we know what's going on, once we engage in community, I think one of the things that we have to face is that there's a choice between seeking God or seeking distance from God. Seeking distance from God, I'll be honest, that's my natural tendency. When things are hard, I don't want to have to hear what God says because I know what God is going to say. Like, you have responsibilities to love other people and love God and love life. God's going to say you need to keep praying and reading and worshiping. And I don't want to do those things when life is hard. I just want to make myself feel better. And those things don't feel like they make me feel better. They seem like work at times. But it's a courageous choice to choose closeness to God when things are hard. And while those things may not make me feel better right away, they do make an impact. They make a real impact. It reminds me that it's not just about me. It's not just about the things I'm feeling. It reminds me that there's a God out there who, no matter what, is with us. Now you can choose courage, not because you are super courageous, but because no matter what, God is with you. So you don't have to be afraid because you have someone with you who's bigger than anything that you're afraid of. But here's the cool thing, is that when we choose courage, people are going to notice. When we choose courage and people see how it works on us, they're going to want that too. So think about it this way. What if the way you choose courage encourages somebody else to see beyond their loss and to see God? Look, we're all dealing with things that we don't like right now, and there are things that we can't change. But in the midst of those changes, God is with us no matter what. All right, see you later. Hope you have a good small group.